Anyway, so good evening, all. My name's Adam Chelton. I'm a qualified mental health advocate, and I'm here to stop the stigma of poor mental health. Now, tonight, I've got a very special guest, Mel Riley. She has a rebellious, creative, and playful approach to both her professional and personal life. She has learned to work smarter and not harder and believes it's not about changing all of who we are, but more about accepting all of who we are that allows us to grow. When not working, she can be found training her two Barky Rescue Dash Huns, is it?
Dachshunds, yeah.
To behave like my kids then. She also enjoys playing wildlife photographer, performance poet, and getting sweaty playing squash. Her favourite saying is, "We are taught time is a healer, but it's what you do with that time that counts." Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
You're most welcome. Now, I want to start because obviously I know a lot of people have been struggling to deal with lockdown and social distancing, even face mask, wearing a mask through this dark time. And now I want to know, what is your opinion on it all?
My opinion on it, I'm living it, aren't I? I'm living it with everyone else, you know. I'm experiencing the ups and downs and the lows of this kind of weird life that we're living, just like everyone else. And so I think that's part of the problem. Is we've all got an opinion, and people can be rooted in very strong opinions, like you're an idiot if you don't wear a mask, when actually for some people it's traumatic to wear a mask. You're an idiot if you go on holiday, because some people aren't ready to go on holiday and other people are. So my opinion is that this brings out the best and the worst in people, and I think it brings a lot of pain point to the surface for lots of people. We're living in a time that is, you know, kind of, we don't have a rule book for living like this because it's not happened before, and so all of us are going to have our coping strategies tested. Some of our coping strategies aren't available to us. My coping strategies have often been letting off steam, playing squash or spin class. Can't do either of those things at the moment, so we're having to change our coping strategies too. We may be adopting new hobbies and interests in the lack of social life. For some people it can be an enlightening time, and for some people it's absolutely a dark time, because actually people are losing jobs, incomes. How do I feed my kids? How do I work from home while I've got kids at home? Everybody's pain points are slightly different. And so even if you find light in the darkness and you share that light, it's quite likely someone else might want to extinguish it. Like, oh, it's all right for you gardening or baking, I'm still trying to work. And so there's I think where everybody's very tetchy and touchier, probably more than usual. I think sleep routines have been affected. Well, as uncertainty goes up, anxiety tends to go up. And there's no end, which is also quite difficult for people. Often when we know that something's coming to an end, we can tolerate it, but when there is no end in sight, yes, it's alleviating slightly, but we're still far from normal. And so people can often drop into despair of, is it always going to be like this? And I don't think it will, but it's a sustained different to normal that we're kind of dealing with here, isn't it?
I totally agree with you, because I admit straight up that for the first couple of weeks in March, this was literally just a week after my own birthday, I thought, I struggled. My depression was deteriorating, my anxiety levels going through the roof, and I thought, I was practically sitting in self-pity, and I didn't know what to do with my life. I didn't know how long this was going for. I was watching the news every day, and they weren't giving real answers. And I thought, you know what, I need to stop watching the news. That's what I recommend for all who actually do experience mental difficulties.
I think you're absolutely right.
Stop watching the news.
Yeah.
Because You go on.
No, I think you're right. Controlling how much you see and hear, and how much you allow what's going on out there to enter into your home, into your brain, into your body, is massively important in keeping well. I too chose to switch off. What was interesting was I stopped watching the news, but then I'd have the radio on in the garden for some music, and then adverts about stay home, stay safe would come on. So I was like, actually, I would watch a TV program, and actually it would, because the TV programs weren't normal. I was watching Country File, which is about farming and animals, and I'm getting old. I like Country File, and actually it was all about COVID. So it's penetrating so much of our kind of worlds. It's actually switching off from it, massively important to allow ourselves to find some calm, to ground ourselves, and to know that we may be safe in our own homes. Of course, when we go out and about in the world, we're aware there's risks out there. Yeah. So
I know since March, just in my local area, there have been as I know, about 7 people since March that have actually committed suicide.
That's so sad to hear, but not surprising. Yeah.
Exactly. It is not surprising. And obviously, another thing I recommend is when you hear on the news, TV program, or even the news, or radio, whatever, stay social distancing. Don't listen to it, because not once have I ever listened to those words. Because since March, since I thought I'm going to say it straight up, as soon as I got off my ass, gave myself a reality check, be a proper role model to my kids, thought I need to feel social connected. And that's what I did. I've joined Zoom discussions. I've started doing this. I've gained qualifications in mental health. And that's how it's all about. There is life and there is hope out there. And we need to start talking.
You're absolutely right. I think actually, I like the saying that we can be physically distant but emotionally close.
Yeah.
And that may be finding ways to connect. Virtual worlds do bring connection, but it's not the same connection as meeting in person. The energy doesn't flow between us. We can feel depleted from Zoom calls rather than full up, like, we don't feel so energized as we do meeting in person. Being able to meet outside now offers some of us, an opportunity to meet and see and hear other people's voices, weather permitting. And so we are finding ways to connect. And also, as you said, to keep ourselves occupied. I don't think there's anything worse than too much time on your hands. Yes, we should take time to slow down and nurture ourselves and take care of ourselves. But we're human beings that have too much time on our hands. We can tend to overanalyze, overthink, and we can spiral into kind of really dark places. So finding things to get our teeth into, whether it's projects, whether it's work, things that give us a sense of purpose, things to get out of bed for in the morning, those things are really important.
Yeah, well, obviously with what I'm doing with these videos, it started off as a coping strategy for myself, self-care. Then it went into a hobby, and now I'm actually ready to turn this into a business.
Yeah.
And this is how it should be. I bring people on all the time, and I've literally got it inked on my arm. Everyone, my story isn't over yet, because we all have a story to be told.
Absolutely.
And because I know that Suicide Prevention Day is approaching, and with what's happened to me last year, where I actually attempted it myself, I'm actually glad to be here today. And yeah, this is a very sensitive topic.
It's a very painful topic to talk about, and I really applaud you for being here. I'm going to share with you, I too am a suicide survivor. I've also been on the other side of the fence and have lost friends to suicide. And so actually it's a painful topic, and one that we do need to talk about. As you are still here and I'm still here, we can say that suicide is a permanent fix for a temporary pain. But we really need to be able to hold people in those times of distress and be alongside them. And actually, we don't have enough services. I get a bit pissed. I'm just about to swear.
Just say it.
Yeah, I get a bit pissed off with mental health awareness, because I think it's really insulting for the people on waiting lists
mental illness,
who have a mental health issue or want support and can't access it. Either the quality of service isn't there or the wait lists are too long. And I'm aware I'm in the private world, so not everyone can afford private therapy either. And so we keep banging on about awareness, but actually what we actually need is funding, because actually with more funding comes more access to services and different types of services. The biggest suicide kind of risk group is men, and actually not all men want to sit in a room and talk, so we could have different kinds of services. I often offer men walk and talk therapy. We can go for a hike and a chat, we can walk the dog and talk if they don't want to sit in a room. Men and women use language very differently, so sometimes women have perhaps a better I'm theming here, so before anybody gets kind of really upset out there who's listening goes, well, I'm not like that. Generally women find it much easier to talk about their emotional landscapes than men, and so being aware of this means that we can tailor our services to meet the needs of men better, in offering different ways to connect with them, and for them to tell their stories and to be heard. So yeah, I think it's massively important that we raise awareness, but awareness in itself isn't enough. Yeah,
absolutely, because a lot of people are holding on to the stigma, and I could take me for prime example. I was abused growing up. That started at the age of 3 years old, and I kept that to myself for 21 years.
Yeah, that's a lot to hold.
Yeah, so I know, prime example, firsthand, how it feels to live in the silence, pretending to be somebody I didn't want to be. And I've also had it thrown at me: stop feeling sorry for yourself, grow up, man up. I've had all of that.
Yeah.
And I don't associate myself with those people anymore.
Good to hear. I think there's an incredible lack of understanding for mental health.
Yes.
Understanding that, I think it takes an incredible amount of courage to reach out for support.
Yeah.
So to not be there when somebody leaps to kind of catch them can be devastating for people. And unfortunately, I hear too many times stories of poor support that leaves people kind of thinking that they're not able to recover, that they're I hate the word fixable, but people think that they're beyond recovery, that somehow they're attention seeking. I absolutely hate those two words. All of us are born for love and connection. We're born for attachments, and so whatever somebody needs to do or say is about bringing attention to the fact that I'm not well, and then I need support. And people do that in a number of ways, and it's our job to really go beyond the behaviours to what emotional distress might be underneath all of that.
Yeah, I spoke with somebody just last week, and he's called Paul McGregor. I found him on LinkedIn as well. I don't know if you've come across him, but he actually described mental health as Lego. Now, I totally agree with that, because if you just break up something you made in Lego, you can't just say to someone, right, fix that. And this is me adding on to what you're saying. You can't just fix that. It takes it piece by piece, step by step. And that's how it is. Do I believe I've made a massive recovery in mental health? No, I haven't. I believe I will, if this will be with me till the day I die.
I think we're recovering, aren't we? I like the word recovering, and that we're all works in progress. And I'm quite open about my history and the struggles that I have kind of faced, the shame, not showing up enough in relationships or in our professional worlds, because I think that helps to normalise that's all of us. It's not, do I have a mental health condition? It's that I think it should be just mental health. It's not, I don't even go with the illness words, because I think actually there's times where we may be well, and there may times where we're not so well. If your partner's just died, you're going to have mental health. Your mental health isn't going to be as well as when your partner was with you. It doesn't mean that recovery isn't possible, but you'll probably live with that grief, and you'll learn to live with the grief alongside you. So I think rather than calling people mental ill, I like to see it as mental health struggles, the struggles to be well, based on what we've either lived through or what we are living through currently, whether it's past or present stuff. And we'll constantly be kind of up and down depending on what's going on in our lives. But you're absolutely right. I wish we were Lego people and we could take our heads off and just put a new one on. That would be cool, wouldn't it? But
Yeah.
it takes a little bit more work than that. I think we can learn new skills. We can learn to flip the negatives. We can learn to sit in gratitude. We can learn to sit maybe with someone else, learn to tolerate what's going on in our bodies, and to be able to one of the hardest things I think for us humans to do is to sit with our own selves and our own pain and distress. Maybe that's because we're not meant to be on our own with them. Maybe we can be alongside people, kind of caring people who can help us to hold what is the unimaginable happens to us. And I think you're right, early childhood abuse, just something that people don't often appreciate, and it wires you up for survival. Trust doesn't come easy to people who have been let down by their adults and not kept safe. They may struggle to regulate their bodies. They may have episodes of anxiety and depression, which often go hand in hand. And so to be able to understand that somebody may not have had the right climate to grow, and it's all about being able to provide a different climate, and to we often accused of just kind of sitting and nodding a lot, us therapists, but actually we do a damn sight more than that. We offer acceptance, but we also offer here there's also a real understanding of into neurobiology. So why can't I find my voice in like conflict situations? Well, if you've kept quiet as a child to keep yourself small and safe, you don't suddenly become an adult, and all that kind of conditioning doesn't just disappear overnight. It goes with you into adulthood.
It does.
And so often we go into adulthood not having the skills that we require in order to stay safe and stay well. I was bullied in the workplace because I was vulnerable, and when you don't feel good enough, you tend to overwork. You tend to end up you end up with what I call the dis-ease to please. So you kind of end up meeting other people's needs and perhaps not your own. And I see this time and time again in my therapy room, and I also identify with it in my own kind of recovery. Having to kind of the reason I think it's so difficult is, in order to thrive, we have to do kind of the opposite of what we did to survive, and that's pretty scary. And so it disrupts our bodies. We can lose our breath. We can go into these kind of overwhelming places during testing times.
Would you believe me if I say the biggest fear is fear itself?
I think I'm interested in when people use the word fear, because I think there's a level beyond fear that we don't talk about, and that's terror. And
Yeah.
we say face the fear and do it anyway, and it's such a simplistic kind of statement for what is much far more complex. It's like step outside of your comfort zone. What people often don't realize with traumatic histories is there isn't a comfort zone.
No, there isn't.
You actually have to take people out of a swimming pool when they're drowning, put them on the side, help them to kind of get rid of the water, and then you have to teach them they have to be prepared to get back into the water learn to swim before you can put them back in the deep end. So it's quite a big process. And the symptoms of trauma can be quite extreme. So if you put somebody on a stage who's not ready, they may freeze, which is more shaming. They may throw up. They may have a panic attack. They may wet themselves. They may soil themselves. All of these are trauma symptoms that can be quite severe. But actually, they're things that I hear about in my therapy room. And the person who holds down a really high profile job, but actually really struggles to not lose her rag very, very quickly. She says, I need to get this anger under control. And actually she flips into rage very, very quickly, because what we know is trauma affects how the brain works. And so she drops into her survival brain very, very quickly. And so actually we're not just changing behaviors, we're having to carve new neural pathways in the brain and get parts of the brain working that don't work so well.
Yeah, because I keep when people come to me and they need a bit of advice, they actually hate themselves. I always remind them of just keep saying this same saying over and over and over again until they believe it. Always remember, you're braver than you believe, stronger than you think, love more than you know, and more beautiful than you imagine.
They are useful words, but there's something more powerful. And I'm a therapist, so if I may, there is something more useful than telling somebody that they're braver than they think. Because in this moment, they don't feel so brave. And in this moment, they don't feel so strong. So what is actually more useful is to sit alongside and say, I hear how hard it is for you to like yourself. I hear how hard it is for you to trust that you've got what you need. I hear how hard it is for you to tolerate these the shame of not feeling good enough. And actually, I think it's by hearing the struggle, being able to name it, and that's pure acceptance. That somebody says that slowly people, when we offer them acceptance and unconditional positive regard, all the core conditions that Rogers talks about in person-centered therapy, that really allows somebody to start to think about the parts of themselves that they reject as well. I often, when I'm working with clients, say there'll be aspects of yourself that you have disowned, the vulnerable parts of yourself, the mistrustful parts of yourself, the crying parts of ourselves. What we tend to do is shove those out the window because we don't want to associate with those bits. They're problematic. But actually, if we invite that little person back in that is crying inside, then actually we can say, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? How we have a myth in the world that I would like to stamp out, that you'd like to stamp out stigma. And that is that if you can't love yourself, you can't love anybody else if you don't love yourself. And actually that's complete rubbish. We don't build our sense of self in isolation. We build it from having good support and care and connections around us. So actually, by accepting somebody's struggles, by really being able to hear them and normalize them, that then allows them, it's not about changing you and making you all fearless. It's about saying we can actually hold our vulnerable selves and our courageous selves in the same body. And so there's often a lot of work to do to rebuild humans, to help them recover, because actually they were never helped to build a robust sense of self in their early years.
Yeah, so obviously I want to go on to obviously your experience. What steps did you put into place for when you started to turn your life around?
I think it's been a gradual process. I couldn't give you 5 steps to Mel's recovery because it was probably around 40,000 steps.
We all have different steps. We all have
millions of steps, millions of, often people say, oh, I wish I had your confidence. What they actually don't realize is that I'm terrified inside, but I tend to be able to have a go anyway now. I can own the vulnerability. There's enough sense of self now to be able to say, well, if you don't like me, that's okay. I like me enough. Yeah. And that's really, really important. So I think therapy was massively instrumental in my well-being.
Yeah.
I think making sense of my history and that I'm not faulty, I was never quite built right in the first place, is useful to know. I wasn't helped to feel loved and cared for. I also think the relationships around me, having a stable partner, has been massively influential, because when I didn't have the belief, there was somebody else to hold that for me. Animals are massively useful for me. My first love was a dog, who I had for 14 years. He taught me about love and loss. So I think we're constantly finding out about ourselves, what we like to do, what we don't like to do. We live in a world that doesn't really help with recovery, because everybody is self-development obsessed, but I think we miss a lot of the tricks along the way. It's kind of like, you can give somebody as much mindfulness as they can stomach, and you can tell them to eat properly, and you can tell them to exercise, but if they lack emotional connections, nothing will work.
Yeah, do you know, I'm gonna add to that, because I totally agree with you, because I keep even the same saying, and I actually start using it myself, is you can guide a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Yeah. And
That's,
the biggest hurdle I see is actually nobody comes into my room often saying, I'm struggling, and I'm not quite sure why. Sometimes people are aware that they have a relational kind of history that's maybe abusive. Sometimes people don't get it because we've got very obvious abuse, but then we have the relational where everything looks okay on the surface, but the emotional care wasn't there. So there's much more subtle forms of wounds that people are often playing out in their now, that they don't realize is connected to their histories. So everyone's kind of story is different, but there's often common themes amongst those. So and we also live in a world that praises productivity and materialism, and so actually when we choose to kind of the things that keep us well may not be the things that we're paid to do. So I'm quite fortunate, and I'm fortunate, but I've worked really hard to create a life that's balanced in terms of work and play, and so I have lots of hobbies and lots of things that keep me well. My photography, bits of writing, gardening, cooking, all the things that some people might see as a chore bring me a lot of joy, because I have quite a playful outlook, and that's part of the brain that's had to be developed, creativity and imagination. I just took great pleasure in making the best guacamole, because I love to cook, and the shop stuff's no good. I want stuff that tastes like it's made in Mexico. Thankfully, I've been to Mexico, so we can put our passions into whatever we choose to put them in. And I think actually our passions are born when our pain and our anger collide. And for me, I'm not passionate about this or that. It's a force that lives within me that goes into all the stuff that I kind of do. And so I don't have the steps to recovery that I can pass on to somebody else, because whenever I work with somebody, I'm kind of like a little spider that crawls all over their lives, and I'm looking for the disconnections, the wounds. I'm looking for what might be it's a bit like a stock take therapy. It's kind of like the cupboard that's like the doors have flown off because it's got too much stuff in there, and so it's almost a clear out of what do we need to kind of leave, what do we need to do less of, what do we need to do more of, what do we need to keep, what do we need to kind of throw away. Not that we throw it away, it's just kind of let's leave that, and it might creep back in. We might have to, just like clutter creeps back in, we have to keep working to kind of push it back out again. Our negative self-talk, the stuff that we say to ourselves often hides a much more vulnerable story underneath that. And so it's my job to help people get unstuck from their stories and know that what happened to them isn't their fault. If they don't have the skills to do something yet, it's not their fault. We all want to leap into stuff. We all want to be brave, courageous, and we want to leap into stuff. but actually our thresholds, the way we're wired up, I know that my threshold for some things is really, really low. And so I'll tiptoe in. But I think tiptoeing is okay. I've got a long, long way in running my own business, in qualifying, and having quite an awesome life. I've traveled all over the place. You know, I've been to see orangutans in Borneo, I've hot air ballooned in Africa, I've taken helicopter trips into Monaco, I've seen polar bears in Scotland. It's, for me, it's about, you know, experiencing life. And so actually that comes from creative and imagine, you know, if we can create it, if we can imagine it, then we may have a chance of creating it. So for me, it's opening up possibilities with people, opening up those possibilities, and then helping them reach their one days or their next kind of thing they want to do or want to achieve. And
so what's one piece of last advice you'd actually give someone who wants to talk about the traumatic events they suffered?
I think it's, again, because we're all so different, there isn't one piece of advice. There are many ways to kind of heal, and we can go to a professional and we can have our stories heard and we can work with somebody. Some people may choose to use art as a means of healing, as a way of soothing themselves, a way of expressing their story. Someone else may use writing and poetry as a way to express their pain and to be heard. We can use, some of this stuff we can do ourselves in terms of, you know, self-development. If you kind of know that something scares you, then there's your moment for growth. If you can work out what's going on here and can I tiptoe in. I guess one of my sayings is, if something is too big and you can't do it yet, how can you make it smaller? Yeah. And so we often have goals, like it's like the losing weight thing. If you put all of your self-worth on this goal of losing weight, then you're going to really come unstuck, because actually it's hard to do, and B, if you kind of say, well, I'm a failure because I haven't lost the weight, then you've kind of missed all the other stuff that you are, because you're not defined just by your waist size, or your dress size. And so sometimes it's about making sure you've got your goals right in the first place. We often think, well, if this happens, I'll be happy. Actually, if you can't be happy now with what you have, why do you think having more will make you happy? The notion that more time and more money is often in there. Now, I'm not saying money is not important, because I used to be homeless, and so actually money gives us choices and a better lifestyle. But beyond a point, it becomes quite useless. It's far more about, you know, what am I engaging with in life? Have I found some purposes? Am I connected to other people? Do I feel safe? Do I feel loved? Can I find my joy in the ordinary? And can I sit with what's going on inside of myself? I had a conversation with somebody a while back who said, I wish I'd called you earlier. I've spent thousands of pounds on stupid purchases to try and make myself happy. I could have called you and saved myself a lot of money. And it was like,
you know what? You're awesome, and I'm glad you came on.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. See, we could be talking for hours about this.
I'm very hard to shut up once I get going. You'll see on the podcast, people ask me like 3 questions and I could just go on and on, because I've spent, I've lived trauma from the day I was born. And so I have a lived experience that is quite in depth, but then I also have about 15 years of studying. I've never stopped studying. So, I'll tell you what your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex does. I'll tell you why you can't access speech in difficult moments. That's your Broca region that shuts down on you. I can tell you why you need the loo all the time when you go for an interview and you're nervous. There are reasons for everything. And when you look through the lens of trauma, it starts to make far more sense.
Yeah, I will be bringing you on again if that's okay with you.
You're welcome to.
And yeah, thanks for coming on again.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Adam, and I wish you well.
You too.